Hey guys, welcome back to another guide. Today I'm going to be talking about positioning. I got some feedback on my last version of this video, namely that it was too long, so we're going to try and keep it shorter this time. The first thing that I want to do is call out the importance of keeping up with different resources that you have available to you, namely guides online, and looking at positioning, because the meta is constantly changing and you need to stay up to date with what's going on. But keep in mind that these guides are very general and don't give you specific information about how to position around other people. Because these guides give you general information about how to position your comps late game once they're finished, what I want to focus on mainly for this guide is early mid-game positioning and general positioning fundamentals. Okay, let's jump right in. First thing I want to talk about is backline. Backline are usually your squishy range carries that you want to protect. It's usually best to keep them tucked away in a corner because it's easier to protect them there. The goal is for your strongest unit to die last, so they have the longest time to deal damage. The rest of your backline will be made up of your sub-DPS units and squishier supports, and you want to position them in order of priority, namely who do you want to die first to last. In this example, we're running 2 ranged DPS units and 2 frontline units. One of the things you can do is position one of your weaker frontline units in the back like this. I call this unit a protector. When the fight starts, it'll walk up like this and catch any assassins that are trying to jump on your backline. Usually you only want to do this when you have a unit that is strong enough to solo frontline. If you don't have a good protector, you can spread out your carries like this. This is another standard opening with Cultist Keeper. In this scenario, we have our Twisted Fate cornered, with Jarvan acting as a protector and Elise as our frontline that walks forward. This is another opener that's common in the meta right now with Elderwood mages. Our Vigar is in the corner protected by these units, with a 2-star Maokai as our solo frontline. Moving on to frontline, you generally only want to have a unit solo frontline if you have one that is strong enough to do so. If your frontline unit is too weak, it's better to run a pair with synergy traits. In a team comp with lots of frontline, you want to spread out your units as much as possible to avoid AoE CC, unless you're trying to protect a specific carry that is weaker than the rest of your team. Let's take a quick moment to talk about tanking sides. The way the game works is that if a unit is in the corner, it's going to target the unit that's closest to it. What that means is that if they have a squishy carry in the corner, it's not going to target the units in the middle. What that means is that the units on the outside of your front line are going to take aggro from more units than the units in the middle. The units in the middle are protected from either side and will probably only get aggroed by the units in these 2 squares. You can use that to your advantage to protect your squishier frontline carries and have stronger frontline units tank one side or the other. Another thing you want to think about is how to position frontline CC units. You want to position them in a way that they can hit the most number of units on the enemy team, and especially the carries if possible. So with units with long range CC, it's oftentimes better to put them towards one side or in a corner like this so that they can hit the carries that are usually positioned in the backline corners. One exception is if your unit is too squishy to put in the front line and might die before it gets to cast. In that situation, you want to put them in the second row. However, once you star them up, you definitely want to put them in the front row so that they can cast as fast as possible. Remember that taking damage increases their mana as well, so the more damage they take, the faster they cast. You'll want to make sure that you're scouting and keeping track of which side your opponents are keeping their units on, so that with units with large AoE, you can make sure that you're hitting as many units as possible, whether it be on either side or potentially in the middle somewhere. Let's talk quickly about keepers, or any trait that gives units shields around it. Make sure to be taking full advantage of the double shields keepers provide by positioning units in the adjacent slots, like so. Also, sometimes it can be a good idea to corner your keepers like this so that it protects your backline units better. However, be aware that when you do this, it makes it difficult for your backline units that need to get out of the corner to get out. So you may want to try a configure that is more centered. However, this is much weaker to assassins because assassins will jump into your backline and easily kill your backline units. So pay attention to what other people are playing before you decide whether or not to put them in the middle or in the side. When you're looking to position assassins or any unit that jumps from your backline to their backline, it's usually best to position them in the middle like this so that they don't get stuck in a clump of units and die instantly. The exception is if you have an item that negates CC on your assassin, then it can be better to position the assassin towards the side of the team that you see that their carries are on so that it can kill them faster. You don't want your assassin to jump on the wrong side of the map and then have to waste time walking all the way across the board to get to their backline. Katarina specifically, because of the way her ult works, you want to position her in the middle in order that her ult hits a large range of units. However, towards the later stages of the game, when people start cornering large groups of units, what will happen is if you put Katarina in the middle like this, when she jumps into the back and ults, she actually won't hit the corner unit. So what you will need to do is position her maybe one square to the left or right, depending on what side people are leaning, so that you can make sure that when she ults, she's hitting all of the important units in the corner. Other backline assassins like Zed and Akali function similarly. Normally you want to keep them in the middle unless they have some sort of CC reduction item. Okay, next I want to take a moment to talk about line ults. The way math works is that when you have a square, the diagonal is always going to be a longer line than the straight line. What that means is that you always want to position your line ults in the corner so that when they ult across the board, they're more likely to hit more units. This goes for all line ults, such as Lux, Ezreal, Azir, even Pyke. Pyke is a little bit special because the way he works is he jumps into the backline and then ults in a diagonal across the board towards your team. So usually it's best to position him in the corner across from your team, because what happens is when the fight starts, their team will walk towards your team, Pyke will jump behind their team, and then as he ults, he will jump back towards your team and then ult along this line. And because their units are walking towards your units in this corner, they will form more of a diagonal line, and he will potentially ult much more units than, say, if he was ulting this direction. Azir is another example of a line ult, but because he's a bit of a special situation, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about him. One of the things that makes Azir so strong is not only the line CC that he provides, but also the soldiers and the ability to bolster whatever's weak on your team, whether it be adding some more frontline or protecting your backline. If you're running a ranged comp, you can set it up something like this, with Azir and the soldiers in the back here protecting your backline. However, I would strongly advise against doing something like this because you can trap your backline, and what will happen sometimes is if, let's say, their frontline units die and Sejuani walks forward, these units will stop attacking because they have nothing in range to attack, and then you'll lose damage. So what I prefer to do is put Azir like this, and what will happen is if units here die and everybody walks forward, Azir will walk forward to attack their backline, and then your backline units will have an outlet to get out. If you have more of a ball like this, you can use the Azir soldiers to shore up your sides like this. Next, I want to quickly touch on items, and specifically aura items. For example, in this situation, we have a Locket on Jax, and he is able to apply the Locket buff to all of the frontline units here. However, the Zeke's item buff is going to waste because this square is empty. Instead, you could have a positioning like this where the Zeke's buff is being applied to both units, but you are losing the Locket buff on Yasuo. So be aware of how you want to position your units before you place aura items. Here's another scenario where aura items are being used very effectively. We have a Locket being applied to the backline. Sometimes you might think it's bad to use Locket when you don't have a bunch of frontline units, but you can actually put your frontline units in the backline to use Locket more effectively. In this situation, Locket is being applied to most of the team, and when the fight starts, Warwick will walk forward and intercept any units that are walking this way, while your backline, which all have Locket applied to them, will have time to DPS as the units walk forward. So don't be afraid to backline your units in this scenario in order to make the best use of the item that you chose. Backlining units is also a great way to counter assassins. In this example, we have Ashe as our main carry and a bunch of beefy frontline units. If we were to frontline all of these tank units, the problem is that versus assassins, Ashe is completely exposed. But by backlining all of our tanky units, which often have some amount of CC, when the assassins try to jump into our team like this, they immediately encounter all of our tank units, and Ashe is better protected. So don't be afraid to backline your entire team versus assassins. The last thing I want to talk about today is sides. Depending on what your comp is, sometimes it's okay to spread your units out. The advantage of clumping your units together is that it better protects your backline. So oftentimes what you'll end up doing is positioning your units towards one side of the map. But the disadvantage is that you are more susceptible to line ults and assassins who are targeting one side or the other. This is where scouting and paying attention to where other people are positioning their units comes in very important. And in the later stages of the game, I think good positioning can oftentimes be the difference between placing second and first. So pay attention to what side other people are leaning toward, especially when trying to position frontline CC units, backline line ults, and keeping your backline carries away from their assassins. Okay, that's all I have to talk about for this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the shorter format. If you like the content, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.